Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the GreenZone podcast for episode 8 of our second season here on the campus of the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth, Minnesota. For those of you tuning in exclusively on our YouTube channel, I want to welcome you back. I'm Cameron Green, the host of this podcast. Today, we're going to touch over a few different sports. We're actually going to cover a little bit more today than usually. We got some World Series predictions. I want to say the World Series is set. It starts tomorrow. Got some predictions about that. The NBA's season has also started on the course of this part of the year. I'm going to start new weekly power rankings. That's going to go on here on the Green Zone podcast, my top 10 for the week. And then, of course, we'll end with our NFL weekly picks and look into last week, look into this week, kind of get that all situated out of the way here on October the 24th in the year 2024. I want to start off here with our World Series predictions. We're going to start off in baseball. Yankees Dodgers in a World Series that's heading our way in just a day from now. And it's the two best teams in baseball. It's the two most iconic franchises in baseball. And I think, to be frank, too, it's the two franchises that host two of the best players in the game. I think I'd argue that Otani and Aaron Judge are both on the Mount Rushmore of baseball right now. If you had to go pure talent wise, I mean, you could argue that two of them are from the LA Dodgers there. If you have Mookie Betts on there as well, that Otani and Mookie are probably on that top 10 or on that top Mount Rushmore. Um, all in all, though, I mean, it's the two best teams that have been proven. They've both been knocking on the door for the last so many years. I mean, the Yankees haven't won a World Series in 16 years, 15 years. They haven't even gotten close to one really, besides going to a couple ALCSs, but really not being in the big dance coming the end of the year. And the Dodgers, of course, doing it during the COVID year, the 2020 year. Not really a real World Series. I'm gonna drop the mic and say it there. It's not quite the same when you have a full season, a full, postseason. Everything's different. No fans, different game. I'm gonna say it's not it's still a World Series championship. Not the same kind though as one that the Yankees won 15 years ago. Not quite that. Um, but I want to give you my thoughts, my predictions, what I think is bound for both of these teams at this part of the season. Um, coming down to it, I think you have a lot of legacy on the line in this series. Um, you want to look at guys who maybe went to one World Series and never got back in their career, and Barry Bonds had really one chance at a World Series, and there's guys that never had a chance at all. Like Mike Trout's never had a chance. Ken Griffey Jr.'s never had a chance. This is the time for Aaron Judge to have a chance, for Shohei Ohtani to have a chance. But at the same time, it's for guys like Mookie Betts to get another chance, for Juan Soto to get another chance. And for some of these guys, this is business as usual. For guys like Max Muncy, Freddie Freeman's had a chance already, but guys like Chris Taylor, dudes who have been around the garden a little bit for them. They've been around for some of these World Series games, being a part of those. And, for the Dodgers, I think they're really trying to identify themselves as the future of the baseball world. If they can host the best player in the world, it's not even close. So Tani's the best player in the world for what he does year in and year out. But you're trying to lure in a lot of more free agents as well. You're trying to build on what you can do, and you're trying to get the foundation for what you want to be a dynasty. I think on both sides, you're looking to do that. Um, my prediction, though, in this World Series is not going to go in the Dodgers' favor. I'm going to have the New York Yankees winning in 7 games. The MVP of that series, I'm going to give it to Juan Soto. I think Juan Soto is going to have a postseason for the ages here, a World Series, a fall classic for the ages. And it's going to lead to an awkward transition for the Yankees because Soto's a free agent after this year. And where is he exactly going to line up in the Yankees' plans long term? If you win a World Series, the World Series MVP, um, the highest arbitration case in baseball history, you are facilitating at least, I think, a 10-year contract. No. I shouldn't even say 10-year. I want to see how old Juan Soto is to be exact. I believe he's only, 25 years old. He's 25 years old. If you're the Yankees, you get one chance to lock him up for good. I think you give him a 12 to 13-year contract until he's about 38 years old. Um, and you give him maybe north of $400 million, maybe $500 million, because the market's going to change so much in that span of time, anyways. So the annual payout might be on your side, but you just gave Judge the lifetime deal to be a Yankee forever. You got Garrett Cole, a lot of money. Another guy that really has a chance to prove it, show that he's worth all the money, worth all the hubbub. But for Juan Soto, I don't think anyone else has more to play for right now than Juan Soto, because you have a chance to be entering your 25th year of life, your seventh year of full team control, with two World Series championships under your belt, multiple Silver Sluggers, multiple All Stars. Um, but the stats can speak a lot for themselves, but the World Series championships also speak for themselves. He's a guy's a winning player, and you can win with this guy in the lineup, even if he's not the premier player in that lineup. You could argue he was in Washington, but I would sit back and say, you look at that Nationals team in 2019, Anthony Rendon was a hell of a player that year. They had a lot of good players, but Rendon seemed to be the guy that was the dude that year. I think, Juan Soto was one of those guys kind of under the market, maybe ahead of his time for that World Series and kind of what you saw the breakout of a superstar. But if you ask me, Anthony Rendon was the best player on that squad. And I think when you look at here in terms of WAR, I'm looking here on baseballreference.com that Rendon was first, and then it went Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer. And then it's Juan Soto. Juan Soto that year batted 282, an OPS of 949, 34 home runs, 110 RBIs, and 150 games played. But of course, at the same time, that was only Soto's second full season of baseball. He finished ninth in the MVP voting. And then I think we truly saw what Juan Soto would become over the next coming years. The last parts of Washington and the years in San Diego, where you look at a guy who gets on base as high as he does and bats as high as he does and hits 35 home runs and drives in over 100 pretty much on a yearly basis. And this year scoring 128 runs, which led all of baseball, was a career high for him, an OPS of 989. And you got a player who can transcend your lineup night in and night out. Um, this is Juan Soto's chance to have the World Series of his life. I know Joe Davis puts it on all the time when he is calling games, the swing of his life. And I'm referring back to the Bryce Harper swing a couple of years ago. But for Juan Soto, you got a lot to play for. And some people will come at me and say, well, come on, Cam. He's going to get that money anyways. He's going to get this amount of dollars. He's going to be a premier player wherever he goes. I'm talking about legacy. I'm talking about legacy. You get two World Series championships before your age of 25, and you're heading into a free agency where the world is your oyster. I've heard reports about the Mets being really interested. I'm going to put out a later video that predicts where I think free agents are going to go, but I think I'm going to make this one clear. I think Juan Soto stays a Yankee because the only other bigger market in the baseball world, no, New York is the biggest baseball market, and the Yankees are superior to the Mets in terms of marketability, historic winning franchise. Mets haven't won a World Series in almost 40 years. Let's just be honest with ourselves. And the Yanks have won in that span of 40 years, I believe, four World Series championships, almost had five in 2001 there. But I mean, you're looking at a franchise that has the ability to lock up a superstar for a long time and build with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto the kind of dynamic they wish they would have had for longer with Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez. Now, they were a long time with them there, but A-Rod didn't get to the Yankees until I believe he was about 27, 28 years old. Get a couple more years of Judge and Soto. The Yankees will be set up for a long time if they can make that happen. Pitchers will come and go. Hitters will come and go. And the Yankee fans will probably have to understand that when you're going to pay Aaron Judge the amount of money he's getting, if you're going to make Juan Soto one of the highest paid players in baseball history, that's going to have to probably be your free agent class for a little while until someone, the next guy comes along and gets another big contract like that. Um, you saw last year that Shohei Ohtani absolutely stopped the baseball free agent pool until he signed, got his deal done, but he was there, and it almost felt like the world kind of paused in the baseball sense of things in free agency. And then when he finally did sign, Everyone kind of got back to what they were doing. And I think Soto is going to be that same thing this year. Now, if you're a big market team, if you're the Dodgers, you're going to be actively interested in them. The Mets, Yankees. You would think the Red Sox would be in that mix of being actively into getting him. I don't know what other big market you could really look at. Maybe Cubs, Chicago, but I don't really see why you would do that. Maybe Philadelphia, but you got Bryce Harper and Trey Turner and Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nolan paid up. You don't really need or maybe can't afford to put more money on the table for Juan Soto. Um, you're really only flirting with about four teams. I think the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mets, and the Dodgers. Everyone else feels kind of, like this is where the rich people eat. This is where the fine dining is. If you look at some of those mid-market teams, the low-market teams, like of course, like Oakland, Tampa Bay, they in comparison here, they probably eat bologna sandwiches. The Yankees, the Mets, they eat lobster, potatoes. It's a weird analogy. But I think Juan Soto's got the most to play with here in this year. That's why I have the Yankees in seven because I think Soto's got something to prove. I think this Yankee team wants to bring a championship to New York. They've been thirsting for one. Got one now with the New York Liberty, but the core four major sports haven't really had a chance to come close. They had a chance with the Knicks this past year, but I think the Yankees have a chance to maybe take over the baseball world once again, like they did in the late '90s, and into the early 2000s. I'm going to shift base here to the NBA season outlook. I'm going to do a new segment on here. It's going to be a weekly power rankings, how I feel about the current status of the NBA outlook right now. Um, to be clear, um, my top 10 right now is for teams who I think are probably the top 10 best teams in basketball heading into the year, if that makes sense. I know we've played a few games, but I don't think there's enough time to really sit there and digest what we've seen in a couple games. Some teams playing, one, maybe their second game tonight. Um, and this is kind of how I feel about teams. It might not be how I really perceive teams where they are right now, but how I feel they're going to be throughout the season as we enter the first week of the year. So at number 10 of my weekly power rankings, I'm going to have the Orlando Magic there. Now that's kind of a stretch for the Magic. I don't know if they're quite in that range of being on the top 10 or if they're knocking on the door because you could obviously look at teams like Cleveland, you could look at teams um in that sense. You could put the Lakers in there. They have, LeBron and Anthony Davis, but the Magic I think are very much a team like the Thunder were last year. A lot of young budding superstars. I think Paulo Banchero was kind of like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Um, you have guys that can play multiple positions like Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs are great facilitators. You have Wendell Carter Jr., a good defensive center that can also score when he needs to. Um, Veteran leadership with Contavious Caldwell Pope and Gary Harris at your two guards. But look at the depth they have on their squad. You have Suggs and Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Contavious Caldwell Pope, Franz Wagner. You have Jet Howard in there to mid the mix. Pablo Banchero, of course. It gets a little, thin maybe in the front court, but in the back court, it's really solid. Orlando Magic, I don't think that they necessarily have exactly what it might be this year to win a championship, but I think they have that year to solidify themselves. And Paulo Banchero has a chance, I think, to solidify himself as being a future superstar of the league because you're looking here, you're kind of trickling down the years of LeBron and Curry and Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, even. There's been teams on here that have been that have superstars that are kind of slowly fading away. Like as Neil Young once said, it's better to burn out than fade away. But right now, I think the Magic have the time to take that ranking high and take it seriously right now. A young squad that can flirt maybe in 2 to 3 years for a serious championship, but this year they're going to contend. They were a playoff team last year, but I have them ranked at number 10 in my weekly power rankings. Coming in at the number 9 spot of a team in a deep playoff run last year, it's the Indiana Pacers. I feel good about this Pacers team, mostly led by Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. But they do have certain positions that are really, I would say maybe not complex, but Benedict Mathurin, if we can get a full season from him this year, if we can get a really nice season again from Miles Turner, I think Indiana has some features that would be willing to compete within the Eastern Conference because some of these teams I think are slowing down. Like Milwaukee, I think is slowing down. There's some of these teams that aren't competing right now. And between the East and the Western Conference, I think the Eastern Conference has a far more amount of players or teams that are tanking, just not really in contention right now. Between the Wizards, between the Bulls, um, thinking in my head, Atlanta's not really doing much right now. They're kind of just existing and building with the core they have and seeing where they want to go. The Western Conference is battling. I think you even look at the bottom teams, they're looking to build on things more than they are to tank. You look at San Antonio, you look at even Golden State, you're like, that's kind of a team that's dwindling or fading away. But anytime you have Steph Curry on your team, I think you have a chance. And they don't have that bad of a roster. You have Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins. They have the chance to be really good. But I don't know if they're going to be. That's the big, decider there. But Indiana, I think, has a chance to mix in well with the East because they have a lot of teams that they can compete with in that Eastern Conference. Moving on to number 8 in the year, they limped their way to the NBA Finals last year. That's the Dallas Mavericks. Once again, fitting. I kind of think about like what I said with LeBron a couple minutes ago. When you have Luka Doncic on your team, I think you can win no matter what. And now you pair him with Kyrie Irving, and once again, another good year for them too. Klay Thompson looks to do a little something different for them this year, but they do have a lot of depth at different positions, and especially in the front court, leading the way with Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, Derek Lively. They have some guys who are going to bounce around some balanced minutes. But it's also, it's always going to be the Lucas show. It's his time to probably win a league MVP, I would want to say, at this time. But Dallas at number 8, I feel good with. Better than Indiana and Orlando, but not quite where I think these next teams are. Number 7, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. The biggest problem with this team is depth and health, I think, because you have a really good trio, I'll say, of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid and Paul George both did not play opening night. It's just something you have to look at and think, are we going to get another game of this all year with Paul George? He had that in LA. I know he played a lot of games last year for LA, and Embiid tried to play as many as he could last year for the Sixers. Um, but at the same time, you need them on the floor to be significantly better than you were last year. Now, Tyrese Maxey showed that he is an all-star caliber player. He could probably lead a team like this in the future if he wishes to leave Philadelphia at any point in time. Because when Embiid and them were out, he was stepping up and keeping them within playoff contention. When Embiid was out last year, I think Philadelphia is a big question mark because they could be in that top 4 or 5 teams, I think this year, even top 3. Um, and if Embiid and George and Maxey play well together, then you have a really good recipe for success with these teams. I think that are in my 6 through 1 either have experience of getting all the way to the finals or are knocking on the door right now. I think the 76ers want to be knocking on the door. I think they're just a little bit outside of that door right now. Number 6 on here, we're going to look at the Denver Nuggets. Not really sitting well with me right now is the fact they lost Contavious Caldwell-Pope. And another year of maybe figuring out Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. And I mean, Jokic is still probably the best player in the world. I'm just going to have to give it to him when you've won the MVP 3 of the last 4 years. And at his level, sorry, but it's really, he really is one of the biggest players in the world and one of the best at his position. It's really insane what he does year in and year out. But Dallas questions me a little bit because you have Christian Braun, that's a good player. I'm thinking depth wise, Zeke Naji's not bad off the bench. Um, it's just really top heavy with Porter, Murray, and Joker. And that's what kind of concerns me a little bit. I think Minnesota was able to play a whole different brand of basketball than what Denver wanted to. And that's how they were able to get by through 7 games last year and get past Denver. I think people are going to start to figure out Denver a little bit more. Just maybe not Jokic because he'll still put up his numbers he does, but Murray and Porter, like they'll be able to figure out things a little quicker. And Denver might have to adjust. So this could be kind of an adjustment year for them. I think from the beginning of the season all the way to the end, You want them to hit their stride most of the season, but I think Denver's in a point where they're going to be kind of adjusting to where they want to be. So I have them at 6. It's a comfortable contender position, but I think they're also going to try and adjust themselves. And it might be a little different week in, week out because I'm going to do this every week on here. Denver next week might be kind of on the hot seat, falling out of the top 10 if they can't seem to figure it out right away. Number 5, I have the Phoenix Suns. And look, it feels like one of the final rides for Kevin Durant to be a fully successful NBA player at a championship level. Looking, he's might define the age right now. It's really interesting to see that Kevin Durant still playing at a high level. I think every time we look at Durant, we're always going to think of him as the sidekick to LeBron and playing at the same time. But Durant is 36 years old as well. Been around the block for a long time, one of the greatest players, to ever play this game. But Durant, does he have the longevity that LeBron has? I don't know. Last year he averaged 27 points per game. He played in 75 games as well. He hasn't played really a full, if you take out last season, he hasn't played more than 55 games since 2018 and 19 season. That's what scares me about Kevin Durant a little bit more than does with LeBron James in terms of durability. Um, Phoenix to me is in a win now situation because they have to be. There is no future because they trade away all their picks. Um, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant need to show that they can showcase themselves on a national level. Bradley Beal's an interesting player because, was he really scoring all those points because he was playing for Washington? Yeah, I don't know. I think Yusuf Nurkic is a really good center. I think the steal of this team, though, is the point guard position. That's Tyus Jones, one of the most efficient point guards in history. I think I would argue myself right now, from 2010 on, or maybe 2015 on, since this game became over a 3-point game, that Tyus Jones has been one of the most efficient point guards in recent memory because I think his assist to turnover ratio is one of the lowest in league history. And he's going to facilitate this squad perfectly because you're going to get a chance to shine. He did last year in Washington, did a tremendous job. But he's going to get a chance to facilitate for Booker, for Beal, for Durant, and then he'll get some for himself as well. Tyus Jones, a perfect point guard for what Phoenix needs right now. I like the dynamic 1 through 5 with them, and that's why I have them at number 5. I think they're one of the best contenders in the Western Conference. Number 4, I have the New York Knicks coming in at that position here. Fresh off a trade of getting Karl Anthony Towns for Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. I don't really know who won that trade. Karl Anthony Towns is very much a ball dominant forward, and Jalen Brunson's the captain of that squad. It is his ship. He's a ball dominant point guard. I don't know if that's going to mesh well to begin with right away. They have a really good starting lineup, though. If you look at Brunson, one of the best budding superstars in the league. Um, Mikal Bridges, a really solid player. You're going to get durability out of him, consistency. Josh Hart's one of the best rebounding guard forwards in the game right now. They have Miles McBride. They have a good core there. But what scares me a little bit is New York's defense. Not the greatest right now, and Dante DiVincenzo I think was going to be a big part of that offense. I think I would have liked New York better if they would have just kept it all the same. I don't know, and I think I would have liked Minnesota better if they would have kept it all the same as well. But New York at 4, I think it puts them in a sole spot right now to be the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference heading into this season. Number 3, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the team that when you talk about the definition of knocking on the door, they need to knock on the door because this city in Minneapolis and the state in Minnesota is dying for a winner. Right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have our attention. They have the floor. People are starting to take them seriously now. Anthony Edwards can really solidify himself as a top 5 player in the game. I think Minnesota has everything it needs to be deep Western Conference final team, if not an NBA Finals team. Um, if they can still get the same production out of Rudy Gobert, Jay McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, and Mike Conley, they're going to be asked a lot, I think, of their bench players like Rob Dillingham. They're going to ask a lot of Naz Reid once again. What concerns me about Minnesota is the injury situation. If anything happens, say for instance, Rudy Gobert misses significant time. Naz Reid comes in and plays center. He's a small center at 6'9". I wonder if Minnesota will be able to respond that way. They played well last year without Karl Anthony Towns, and I think that's one of the things that they looked about flirting with this trade. But I think Julius Randle is going to have an interesting role in this squad because he is kind of the number two in the offense now. Anthony Edwards, of course, being the one, but Randle is probably the go-to guy for the number two, and we'll see if he meshes well. I think he does mesh better with Gobert than Cat ever did. So we'll see what Minnesota wants to do. I have them number three in my spot on my power rankings. Moving on to number two, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think this Thunder squad could be a championship winning team. I really do. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander at point guard, of course, you're getting of him almost 30 plus points per game, year in and year out. I love the fact they got rid of Josh Giddey and brought in Alex Caruso because defensively, this team was super solid down low. Chet Holmgren is one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. Jalen Williams can play the guard. He can play the small forward. He can play the power forward. He does whatever he needs to do for you. Um, Getting Alex Caruso, a guy who has been able to at least notch two steals and almost a block per game at the guard position, locks down the perimeter, while Holmgren night in and night out locks down the paint. I really like this Thunder squad. You got Lou Dort in there. It would have been awesome if Isaiah Hartenstein would not have to miss significant time. But when you have SGA, who was leading this squad at 32 points per game last year, Chet Holmgren's, I think, going to take a massive step forward, as well as Jalen Williams. You got Isaiah Joe coming off the bench for the Thunder. There's a lot of good things to like about this Thunder squad. They're well coached. They have a balanced front court to back court area. They're deep. Um, Oklahoma City, don't surprise me if they are a serious NBA contender that we're talking about in the month of June. And our last one here, of course, the Boston Celtics at number one. I have to give my hats off to them. I have to give them their flowers, defending NBA champions. And the other night dropped 29 three-pointers on the Knicks. I mean, they are probably the best 1 through 5 in all basketball right now. Holiday, um, Derek White, Tatum, Horford. They have exactly what you want from a squad. And you talk about top heavy. I don't even think this team needs depth. Like, I think this is what you want to build when you say you want a dominant starting five because you don't want to have to worry at all about what if one guy goes down, fine, we'll just have another guy pick it up. We don't have to sit here and say if Al Horford goes down, oh no, we got serious problems here because we don't have Al Horford. Like I say, um, if Luka went down for Dallas, Dallas would be in trouble. I don't think this Celtics squad would be in trouble that much. Um, excuse me there. But Boston, I think, has a chance to defend its title, to be back better than ever. I guess it's a way to put it. But when you're already a team that's one of the best in the league, it's hard to recover from that, rebound from that as well. Boston Celtics right now, my preseason, as we enter the first part, favorites to win the NBA title. So I will be doing this segment every week here on the Green Zone podcast. We're going to be coming in, um, who's coming up, who's coming down. We'll be looking at that there. But this is a weekly thing. I want to keep connected here to the NBA. I don't really talk about it that much. I don't feel like last year. Um, and there's a chance. We got a chance to talk about this a lot here. We got a chance to elaborate on this more, expand our horizons. And I think this segment will be nice to have week in and week out. To wrap things up for today's Green Zone podcast, I want to do our weekly picks as we always do on here. Let's look at last week's picks before we start here. This is off my spread picks as well. Basing off what we had last week, New Orleans was one incorrect. New England was not correct. Atlanta was not correct. Minnesota was not correct. The Rams and Panthers both did not cover their spreads. The Jets laid an egg against the Steelers. My pick of the week, probably the Cardinals over the Chargers. Did not, I confidently felt good about that one week in and week out. Win and die with the Cardinals. They win games that they probably shouldn't. They lose games they probably should. If you are betting on the Cardinals this season, take my advice. Just maybe think about that right there. If they're playing a team they probably win, Cardinals probably going to lay an egg. Gonna try and upset a team? Yeah, Cardinals might be in that mix. So I'm going to start us off here with our first pick on the Thursday night game. It's the Minnesota Vikings. We're in the the throwback sweatshirt. They're going to be traveling to Los Angeles, who's now healthy, knock on wood for the time being. LA Rams. Vikings are right now 2.5 point favorites. I am picking the Vikings in both the spread and the straight up because I think this team needs to rebound. They got humbled last week and realized that A, they can hang with Detroit, but B, I think sometimes that first loss is almost therapeutic if we can get back to earth a little bit, get back to work. Kevin O'Connell going home, I guess you want to say, to a Super Bowl champion squad that he had there. But LA, I mean, they're dangerous when they have Kyron Williams right now healthy, like they do a week in and week out. But now you got Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, you're getting some of your guys back. Um, I think LA right now has a good spot to get back in their season. It's a huge implication for them if they win this game tonight. They probably need this game more than Minnesota does. But I'm still going to take the Vikings at 2.5 point favorites in the spread and in the straight up. We'll look at our noon games here. The Baltimore Ravens are 9.5 point favorites over the Cleveland Browns, and it's happened. Deshaun Watson no longer playing right now, out for the season with a torn Achilles. Jameis Winston will step in there. Cleveland at 1-6. I mean, I think they're starting to unload the wagon a little bit now. They have to start looking at that. Um, I'm going to take the Ravens in the straight up pick because Derrick Henry is that good. Derrick Henry is solid, one of the best running backs we've ever seen in the last, probably, you could argue 21st century. Derrick Henry's got to be up there for one of the best we've seen. Lamar Jackson is that good. He's on pace right now to probably win his third MVP in his career. But I think the spread at 9.5 is a little disrespectful to Cleveland, sorta, because Cleveland really hasn't given anyone a chance to really root for them. But I think having Jameis in there will spark something for them. It's going to spark something for that Cleveland squad. Not saying they're going to win this game by any means, but I think they will cover the 9.5 point spread against the Ravens. Next noon game, another big spread. The Detroit Lions are 11.5 point favorites against the Tennessee Titans. 11.5 points is a lot. A couple touchdown lead as a team, but I'm all for it. I think Detroit's one of the best teams in football. I think they are the best team in the NFC. Tennessee, however, not really where you want to be, and you got worse by getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins. Detroit's going to take this one in the spread and the straight up. I would usually never go for 11.5 point favorite spreads, but when it's basically the best team in football, arguably against the worst team in football, it's just a 2 touchdown game, which I think they'll get out to an early lead and be able to hold that. Um, Lions to take the sweep in the spread and the straight up. Arizona Cardinals are 3.5 point underdogs as they travel to Miami. It appears to be Tua Tagovailoa's return, which is probably lovely for all fantasy owners that have Tyreek Hill on their team and Jalen Waddle. Good news for them. I think there's going to be some rust though for Tua. I'm a Tua fan. I really love watching him play. But I think Arizona's clicking right now better than Miami will, and maybe you could say that there's going to be some response from Miami. But I think Arizona at 3.5 point underdogs. I'm going to take the Cardinals in the straight up. I'm going to take the Cardinals in the spread. If my theory works here, they should probably win this game. They are probably not going to win this game, but I have faith in the Cardinals. I have faith in them this week. 3.5 point favorites. I will take them to cover the spread as 3.5 point underdogs against the Dolphins. New York Jets at 7.5 point favorites against the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Jets are 2-5. Patriots are 1-6. I think New York needs to save their season. I said that last week. I'm going to say it again. They need to save their season. They're going to cover this spread. They're going to have something to prove against New England, against a division rival. They're going to come out there with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to take this one in the straight up and the spread as well. Quick one going over for that one, but I just think I've said time and time again, New York needs to respond, and they have not responded yet. Why not against one of the worst teams in football? Have yourself a game. Click with Devontae Adams. Click with Allen Lazard. Click with Garrett Wilson. Have Breece Hall have a monster game, and then get him off the field because you don't need anyone hurt. Tampa Bay learned that the hard way last week, I should say. And we're going to jump into Tampa Bay next week here in our next game. In this week's game here, Atlanta Falcons are 2.5 point underdogs at Tampa Bay. I don't know why Tampa Bay is probably the favorite in this game. You lost Mike Evans for at least probably a month. You're going to lose Chris Godwin for the season. That's not a good recipe to win games, especially when Baker Mayfield has been playing that well. And I'm not ripping on Baker here, but it's not like Cade Otton's been the number one tight end in all fantasy leagues. Chris Godwin's been a top five receiver this year. Mike Evans probably not too far behind him. They're gonna have a week to maybe figure out what do we go from here and who's gonna show up and be the guy that's steps up and says, I'm gonna be that guy, ride my back, we'll be all right. Whereas Atlanta knows who they are. They have Bijan Robinson still balling out here. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kirk Cousins is playing well. Um, Atlanta doesn't need that week because they've already had those weeks entering the season. Atlanta is going to take this one in the straight up and in the spread for this week's game. Green Bay Packers will be taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's in Jacksonville. Jacksonville picking up its second win of the season last week. Green Bay Packers are 5-2, and I think with Jordan Love, in Love we trust. Um, it's going to be a quick one. I'm going to go with this one. I think Green Bay is the better team on paper, and a better team. They're more resilient than Jacksonville is. Green Bay is going to be 6-2 after this week. They were going to cover that 4.5 point spread over Jacksonville. Next game here is kind of a funky one because Indianapolis is 4-3. They're 5.5 point underdogs. Houston is 5-2. Indy could potentially be the number one seed in this division. I think if they win this game, it's in Houston. It's a tough place to win, especially since they've been getting better. I think Houston's going to take the 5.5 point favorite, and they're going to play a good game. I think that interior edge is going to get to Anthony Richardson, try to contain him from scrambling. Houston in the straight up, Houston in the spread for this week. Philadelphia Eagles will be taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, where the Eagles are 2.5 point underdogs against the Bengals. And, Cincinnati has kind of found its groove again, kind of going to get back to the division, but they have to compete with Pittsburgh and they got to compete with, Baltimore right now, where Philly's got to try and just maybe not screw up the East. I think the Commanders will eventually fall back down to earth and Philly will reign up in that division. They're going to get a really good decisive win here. Philadelphia is, I'm going to say. They're going to cover the 2.5 point underdog spread over Cincinnati, and they're going to move on to 5-2. Eagles in the straight up, Eagles in the spread. One of the more confusing games this week is the Chargers and the Saints. Now it's in LA. SoFi is not a great place to play for home field advantage, but New Orleans is starting Spencer Rattler. They've lost 5 straight. At some point, you want to say New Orleans has got to win something. I don't really think that's the case this week. I don't think with Spencer Rattler, who clearly didn't look ready last week, and him to get another start, not going to be a winning formula for them. I think the Chargers will take care of business at home and win by 7.5 points at least, maybe a 10 point victory. They're going to win over Spencer Rattler. Defense going to have a field day. They're going to take that one in the spread and the straight up. Bills and Seahawks is a fun game for this weekend. The Seahawks really upset last week after losing 3 straight, showing that they're still one of the best teams in the West. Bills are one of the best teams in the AFC. We got a good battle here, but the Bills are in Seattle. It's a tough place to play. But I think Buffalo will cover the 2.5 point spread here. They've been playing well, and I think Amari Cooper is only going to get better here in Buffalo. They're going to take that 2.5 point spread over Seattle. Looking here at one of our final games of the week, the Chicago Bears are 2.5 point favorites on the Washington Commanders. The Commanders now at 5-2, and the Bears are 4-2. I think the Commanders are going to have a really solid game this week. I think it's going to be a really good battle of the rookie quarterbacks. We're going to look in here, but I think the Commanders will at least cover this 2.5 point spread. It might be a back and forth game. Caleb Williams has been looking way better than he did the first couple of games. Jaden Daniels to see if he's healthy. This pick might flip for me if Jaden Daniels is not fully healthy going into the week. But right now I'm going to take the Commanders to cover this spread. But I will take the Commanders also in the straight up. But that pick might flip for me. I'll explain it next week if I do end up flipping it. Carolina Panthers are starting Bryce Young. They are 1-6 on the season. They will enter as 7.5 point underdogs against the Denver Broncos, who are 4-3. Had a really commanding win over the Saints last week. Denver Broncos are one of the best teams in their division this year because they are resilient and have good coaching and good quarterback play. Bo Nix has played really solid this season. I think Denver is going to take this one by a 7.5 point spread. They're gonna be 5-3 after this week. Where Carolina, Bryce Young, we'll see if it gets any better entering this week. But we'll see what that happens with them. Kansas City Chiefs will enter the Las Vegas Raiders as 9.5-point favorites in Vegas. Listen, Mahomes has owned the NFL the last 6 or 7 years. They're 6-0 to start this year. Chiefs are going to win this one over the Raiders pretty easily. I don't think they really know what they're doing right now offensively. Chiefs will take this one, 9.5 points. Their defense is going to expose the Raiders for what they are. Sunday Night Football this week is the Dallas Cowboys taking on the San Francisco 49ers, a good historic battle in San Francisco. I'm gonna have an upset watching this one. I'm gonna take the Dallas Cowboys in the straight up and in the spread. I think Dak needs to have a really solid game. I think Dallas needs to have a game they can get back and maybe win a game or two. But if San Fran falls to 3-5, I'm really concerned about where the 49ers are going to stand here because the NFC West is starting to get away from them a little bit with Seattle and Arizona both playing well. I mean, even the Rams, you could say, are still on the watch list for them. But I think Dallas is going to take this one, and they're going to move to 4-3 in the weekend. They'll cover in the spread and in the straight up. And in Monday Night Football, it's the New York Giants taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, Russell Wilson shows he's still got it. I know it's only one game, but I'm going to say it's a pretty good game for Russell to have. He's going to bounce back and play against a defense that is weaker than last week's. Uh, and he's gonna have a really solid game. Pittsburgh's gonna be 6-2 after this week. They're 6.5-point favorites. I have them to win this one and move on to 6-2. They are 5-2 right now. Pittsburgh over the Giants. So that's it for the weekly picks here in the Green Zone podcast. And that's all I got for you today. I want to thank you for tuning into our YouTube channel, Green Zone Pod. Also follow us on X at Green Zone Pod. I'm Cameron Green signing off. I want to thank you guys for listening to all our Green Zoners out there. And we'll see you on the next one next Thursday.